Thank you.
So Heather's going to show a few more clips, probably clips that no one has seen yet, right?
Well,
not publicly?
we had a crowdfunding campaign recently to raise money for the finishing of this film, and so some of these clips have been seen online for that purpose, but I'd like to show them here just for people who haven't already seen them.
Thank you.
So this first one is a video of 47 Soul, which is a terrific Palestinian hip-hop dubstep group. I don't think I said that. Dubstep?
Yeah.
Dubstep group.
New genre.
New genre. And just a quick message in support of the film. So here we go.
Salute everyone. This is 47 Soul from Palestine in Jordan. We salute and we recommend everybody to go watch Rabbis Intifada, the film. In light of what's been happening in the last week and the confirmation with the new law in Israel confirming the apartheid nature of the state, we salute all our Jewish brothers who have a different voice, all those who've been struggling side by side by the Palestinian people, all the Jewish voices in the diaspora and in the Holy Land, against racism, against apartheid, and against colonialism. Thank you for that support to all of you.
And I'm also going to show a quick clip of the Israeli-born scholar and historian and author of many books, Ilan Pape, who we also interviewed for this film.
Neturei Karta are being called by Israel and by pro-Israeli communities, especially in the United States, as traitors. And I can relate to it because I'm also called a traitor in Israel. I think most of the Israelis perceive Neturei Karta as aliens, as people who represent exile, represent the old Jewish life that Zionism wanted to leave behind. I think Neturei Karta has some ideological meeting points with progressive Jews around the world, especially those who would define themselves as anti-Zionists. In some of the demonstrations around the world, you can see anti-Zionist progressive Jews, Palestinians, and Neturei Karta demonstrating together.
Thank you, everybody. So maybe we could spend, if it's okay with you guys, we could hear from Rabbi Weiss next, and then after that we can take some questions from the audience, if that sounds good to everybody.
I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, with the help of the Almighty, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. And first and foremost, we have to thank Nancy Mansour and her organization, Existence is Resistance, and together within our Lifetime organization for organizing this conference, a very distinguished conference, and it's very crucial to have this conference. It's unfortunately 70 years, over 70 years now, it's 71 since the ratification of the so-called Jewish state, the Zionist state of Israel. So it's really critical to have a conference that with the help of the Almighty, we hope to bring, we hope a peaceful and speedy conclusion to this, an occupation, this Nakba, and we have to do what we can as human beings, as the Almighty requires of us, to stand up and speak out when we see such an injustice in the world. So we hope there will be a change, and this will be the catalyst, this will be the start of this change and the end of the occupation. Zachariah, thank you for, and then of course we have Heather Tenzer, which is of this panel, the tremendous documentary that she's put together, that we've had, that we've seen here, the Rabbis Intifada, which tries to, and God's help, does clarify the opposition that the Jewish people have to the Zionist state of Israel. My colleague, Rabbi Feldman, very eloquently, very concisely, really encompassed the reasons why we are opposed to it. But of course, we're talking again over 70 years of occupation, and really it's not only 70 years, because Zionism didn't start in 1948. Zionism started at the beginning, literally before the 20th century, and it's been occupying, attacking, brutally killing, and so forth since the beginning of the, maybe like in 1890s, they started going up to the Holy Land. And this is, they're doing the root of evil, killing people physically, and again, Rabbi Feldman mentioned spiritually to the Jewish people. And we really have to, it's very hard, and I mean, he spoke a few minutes, and it's very hard, really, in such a short time to be able to explain all the different issues of Zionism. And of course, I couldn't do that either in the little time that I have, but I pray to God that I should be able to just maybe bring a little more clarity to this issue. And we hope that this should be maybe from this room, they will go out to the world a light, like you always start with a spark, a little light pushes away a lot of darkness, as our rabbis say, that we should be able to, that the world should awaken, just like Heather Tenzer said, that she was a student, a Jewish student who saw, who was marching, she thought, with the will of the Jewish religion, of the Jewish people and the Jewish religion, in support of this great success, the creation of the Zionist state of Israel. And then she was all of a sudden, she just saw on the side rabbis opposing it, and it was hard for her to comprehend what this was all, to get her head around this, what this was all about. And thank God she changed. She says that it's 20 years, but we hope that today will be the beginning, with God's assistance, which God is almighty and all capable, that we should have this year. We should be celebrating, as I say, a free Palestine. But anyway, let me just try to touch on a little bit. I know the time is very short, but let me just mention again. First of all, in the flyer that they put out for this conference called Palestine Lives, they said Neturei Karta is Yiddish-speaking, socially conservative rabbis speaking out in support of Palestinian liberation. They oppose Jewish nationalism in the state of Israel. But why, at a time when most American rabbis unconditionally support Israel, are these rabbis engaged in an intifada against Israel? So I don't want to be nitpicking, but that's the point of this whole issue. They say they give it as a given that most American rabbis support it, and why would these rabbis engage in an intifada against Israel? That's part of this makba, the tragedy. Somebody who, let's just give an example, would be an atheist, let's just say, teaching Christianity or Islam, any other religion, and decide to, as educated, receive their degrees in any type of religion, whatever it may be, and they would just say, just throw in a couple of sentences that they don't believe in God, or that God forbid God doesn't exist, or things like that type of thing. But they would go around announcing that they're priests, or that in any religion, what it may be, or imams. Then you would say, you would just turn around, you would stand up in the middle of that session, you would say, you're a fraud. You wouldn't say that they're imams, you wouldn't call them priests, even though they have a whole bunch of documents and degrees showing that they're priests and imams. Now, when you say that, when most American rabbis unconditionally support Israel, it's a contradiction in and of itself. You can't support Israel and be considered a rabbi. You can't be considered a religious Jew and support Israel, because it's in direct contradiction to what Judaism is. Now, it may be presumptuous. You may look at that as that for me to say such a thing is really not acceptable. But the fact of the matter is that Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. We made a bond with God. Anybody who knows what Judaism is, we made a pact, a bond with God, a bris it's called, on Mount Sinai, to uphold the laws of the Torah. Judaism is subservience to God. But Zionism came a mere 130 years or whatever, maybe this movement in that area, and they are transforming our religion into nationalism. And they are blatantly ignoring clear teachings of the Torah that forbids us, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we are forbidden by God to, we were put under 3 oaths. One, that we should not return en masse to the Holy Land as a nation. We were banished by God because of our sins, to be as a nation with our Jewish sovereignty, and that ended with the destruction of the temple. We were spread out throughout the world, and we are forbidden to return en masse. We are forbidden to rebel against, secondly, we are forbidden to rebel against any nation. Jews have to be loyal citizens in every country where they're residing. And thirdly, we're not to make any attempt to end exile. And for 2,000 years, we went through the Crusades, the Inquisition, where anybody who studies history knows, if you study just a little bit of that in the Inquisition, what that meant, how Jews were tortured, how they were burned at the stake, and all they needed to do was to drop their religion and to convert to Christianity. That was all that was necessary, and they would have been given everything that their homes in them, their fortunes and so forth. They gave everything up. They refused, and they were burnt at the stake. And this is what Judaism is. Yet, Judaism does not permit us, through all that time of 2,000 years, and we had the opportunities, it was called the Golden Age of Judaism, we could have bought a piece of land. But Jews knew we are under oath by God not to create Jewish sovereignty. Zionism came along, and anybody who would follow the leadership of, the history of Zionism would know that as a whole, almost in its entirety, the leadership of Zionism were either atheists or heretics, certainly. They did not believe and they did not accept the Jewish religion. They detested it, and therefore they wanted to drop and throw away the religion, and yet have their identity as Judaism, as a nationalism, as a proud nationalism, that they're going to have an Olympic team, and gold medals, and be Nobel Prize winners, and so forth and so on. They're going to have their army, the strongest army, and they keep on, announcing what they, they're boasting of what they have better than any other country. And they have a land, of course. And so this is what Zionism is: a total transformation, as Rabbi Feldman mentioned, a transformation from religion to nationalism. It is totally not acceptable. And for people to come and call themselves rabbis and leaders of community and to incorporate this Zionism to the Jewish religion is basically claiming that they're priests or imams, but God doesn't exist. It's the same thing. It's the same concept. And we have to realize that just because they have a powerful movement, they have AIPAC, and they have many synagogues, and they have a powerful army and so forth, and they're very influential. That does not give it credence, not one iota of credence. It doesn't give power, does not give credence to give something that's wrong to make it considered right. That's a fact. We have, again, the time doesn't permit, but we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. Now, if anybody goes through this book, you will see that it's the leaders of all throughout Europe. Zionism came from Europe and throughout the world. It was the leading rabbis that nobody could refute, that these were the leading voice of Judaism. And they, around the world, they all stated in unison in their different styles that it is unacceptable, this concept of Zionism. It's in different styles and so forth, but I always like to mention there was Rabbi Yisroel Dovid, because he's like one of the very famous from Poland. He lived in Radin from 1839 to 1933, passed away before the Second World War. And just like one of his statements, he wrote, "The Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot." The dead limbs of which is causing, in other words, they're affecting the whole Jewish world community to rot. It is so poisonous. And he made something called the Mishnah Berurah, where anybody knows Jewish law, people live and breathe by his law books, everybody follows his law books, nobody can refute that he was a leader of Judaism. And therefore, the point is that this whole concept of having a Jewish state is contradictory to our religion. It's antithetical, it's unacceptable, and it is a rebellion against God to have that. But the Zionist leaders had no problem creating the state and rebelling against God, and creating this image, this facade of religion, or using the Star of David, or using the menorah and all these things, because they don't have the morals that dictates to them that they shouldn't lie or steal, because if you're rebelling against the whole concept of the Torah, you're killing and stealing, then you have no problem with lying either. And they have no problems actually with stifling and actually killing their opposition from the Jewish people and brutally beating them. And if you would go to our site, which is NKUSA, www.nkusa.org, or if you would go to the other site, Israel versus Judaism.org, Israel versus Judaism, you will see how the Jewish people today are standing on the streets. They have mandatory military service in Israel. And our brothers and sisters who are true to Judaism, who did not capitulate to the Zionist pressure and their murderous attacks, they refuse to go to the army. This is ongoing for 70 years. The boys and girls are forced to go to the army, and they refuse to go, and they get brutally attacked and beaten. And then there's demonstrations for other reasons, which is, again, the time does not allow us, but they dig graves. They decide to make an extension to a highway. They'll uproot graves and so forth, because they have no respect for the dead, which is sacred by us. So we have Jewish people standing in the holes that they're digging, and they get killed, they get beaten, arrested. And this would happen in any other part of the world. Of course, the Zionists would be the first ones to be there and accuse those countries of being anti-Semitic. But they do this daily. You can go to Israel versus Judaism and see that, what's happening. This is happening daily. It's for 70 years and more. We've had maybe the first martyr, famous martyr, certainly was a diplomat whose monument is in Denmark. He was a close friend of the King of Denmark, and he lived in Denmark, and he decided to go to immigrate to the Holy Land before the creation of the state, because he thought he would decide to become a religious Jew. He thought that was how to become religious, was to join Zionism. But he was a very serious person. His name was Dr. Dahan. His blood should be avenged by God. And when he went there, he started joining the Zionists, but he was a very serious person. And then you realize that the chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, and the Jewish community that was living there for these hundreds of years were totally opposed to this Zionist concept of creating a Jewish state. And therefore, he became close with them, and he said, "I'm going to represent you. I'm going to go to the British Parliament. I'm going to have your voices heard," because they were being squelched. They were being actually murdered by the Zionists. And so the Zionists went and they assassinated him. They warned them that it was not going to be solved, and they killed him cold-bloodedly in 1924. You can go, as I say, see these pictures of the tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating, whether it is in Jerusalem, whether it is in other parts of the Holy Land. The pictures are there. It's for everybody to see. You can see both the demonstrations. You can see the speeches, the suffering of the Jewish people who are opposing Zionism. Our issue is to let the world know that they're being duped. They're clearly being duped, and the ones who are supporting them from the Jewish community is one of two issues. Either they fall and prey to the Zionist propaganda. They fall and prey to the Zionist propaganda because we went through, as everybody knows, of course, and I'm an example of this. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father escaped from Hungary when the Nazis came into Hungary. My mother's family was almost entirely wiped out in Poland, and the Jews still feel that fear because it's their grandparents, it's their parents. I'm just over 60 to 120. My first cousins were killed in Auschwitz. We're talking about this generation. We know what it means. We felt it. We hear. My father-in-law passed away two, three years ago, a few years ago, and he used to wake up in the middle of the night screaming till he passed away from nightmares because he was in Auschwitz. This is what our lives are about. So when the Zionists come along and they start equating the Muslims as a whole and the people of Palestine as part and parcel with the Nazis, it's very easy to strike the fear of God, to put the fear into the hearts of the Jewish people who are children and grandchildren and relatives of these people who suffered. So they use fear-mongering, they use panic, that is one approach they use. And they use ignorance of the modern, what they call modern, which is euphemism for Jews who lost their religion, who lost their knowledge of their religion, who compromised their religion. They call it modern because they don't dress like the Jewish people did throughout the generations, and they like to give it as a pleasant name that they're modern. They don't like to say that they dropped part of their religion, that it's compromised religion. So they're lacking, a lot of them, in their knowledge of what Judaism is. As Rabbi Feldman mentioned it very concisely, that they don't know that Jewish law forbids us to rebel against nations. We have to pray for the well-being of every country we are. We have to show gratitude for the countries that took us in when we embraced us by the suffering and by the Crusades and Inquisition throughout history. It was the Muslim countries who opened their doors and embraced us and gave us a home that we could flourish as distinctly Jewish people amongst Muslim people without any human rights groups necessary to protect us, without anything. We lived together in total harmony and peace as a general rule. And then the Zionists come and they use the lack of knowledge from the people of Europe and the people in the Western world and the United States, and they build on this and the lack of knowledge of Judaism and of the historic facts, and they say, oh, the Muslims are anti-Semites. The Muslims hate the Jews. Of course, anti-Semitic is a word that's in itself a failure of Zionism, because Semites means also Muslims. That's beside the point, but the semantics. But we're talking about, they call it that they're anti-Semites. It's so vile, it's so repulsive, revolting to hear such a thing, when, as a Jew, we should be giving out everything that we have to help the Muslim and Arab people and the people of Palestine, the Muslim and the Arab populace, because they've helped us so much. Yet this is how they're repaying them. So it's not the layman, it's not the general public of the Jewish people around the world, because they are what we call a korban. They are a sacrifice of this selfish, evil plan of Zionism that was created by some leaders, because the general populace, like I say, they were brought up under this propaganda and fear and so forth. So, and there are, unfortunately, leaders who are maliciously doing what they're doing. That is what the chief Rabbi Feldman mentioned, Rabbi Teitelbaum of West Memory. He didn't mention that he was the chief rabbi of Palestine, who was elected the chief rabbi of Palestine now again, when I say the chief rabbi of Palestine, there's two, the Zionists, as part of their evil trick, they made, of course, a rabbinate to give it legitimacy, and they made chief rabbis, and the world looks at their chief rabbis and their rabbinate as something that represents Judaism, when the whole thing is, again, a farce. It's just to cover up that they're simply a fraud. But there was a rabbinate. There was Rabbi Sonnenfeld at the time in the 1920s who was opposing Zionism. In 1947, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky, who pleaded with the United Nations. It's in the documents of the United Nations. We always like to show it. They said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was Rabbi Dushinsky. It was 1947, right before the ratification of the United Nations of the Zionist state. It's in the United Nations records. And he was the chief rabbi representing the Jewish community that was there for hundreds of years in Palestine. What did the Zionists do? To legitimize their fraud, they made a rabbinate, but it doesn't mean anything. Now, the Rabbi Teitelbaum was, after he passed away, the Rishonsky Rabbi Teitelbaum, he was the chief rabbi, and he moved to New York, and I'm going to finish this 2 minutes. He was the chief rabbi of Palestine, and he kept on pleading, and he urged his followers that they should move away from Palestine. Many remained to fight from within, but the point was that he came representing the people of Palestine, and representing, actually, as the grand rabbi, as the one we looked at as the world leader, the Jewish communities around the world, like Rabbi Feldman mentioned, the ones invariably around the world, the Jews who are true to the teachings of the Torah, because we are Jewish and we remain true to Judaism, and not because we are Neturei Karta, as it's as in the Florida things, because why are Neturei Karta rabbis? It's not Neturei Karta. Neturei Karta is only a name given to the ones who are vocal in their opposition to Zionism. It is around the world, anywhere, who speak up because Judaism does not accept this occupation. We cry and feel with the suffering of the Palestinians. It's a direct rebellion against God, to kill or to steal. It is our hearts cry with the people of Palestine. As I said, we have to show gratitude. It's in every facet, in every manner and shape. It is totally incongruous and unacceptable going to Judaism. So one day the world will awaken to this, and we will come with God's help. We have to do, but God will accomplish to bring an end to this totally unacceptable rebellion against God. It's called the Zionist State of Israel. It should happen speedily and peacefully. And now I'll give back the floor. We hope that this will be beginning to bring this result in sooner nowadays.
We just want to have some time. We have about 5 to 10 minutes for some questions, and we just want to make sure that you all can ask Heather or Rabbi Weiss any question you'd like for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for your work.
I think we can probably hear you. Yeah.
I'm a big cry. So, my name is Sandra Bahur, and I am a Palestinian American, but my parents do live in Elvira, town of Palestine, so I visit frequently. I have to say really quickly, I know you don't like statements, but the first time I ever saw your group was in Washington, D.C. in a Palestinian rally, and I turned to my sister here, Rita, and I said, is that for real? Are they really, really protesting against Israel? Because I had never seen this group before, a group of rabbis, and I was really taken. My question to you is, in the last 10 years or so, have you seen with your work and the mindset that's going on now, have you seen a change? Have you seen anything, fruits of your work coming out through protesting and things like that?
With the help of the Almighty, the first thing is we stress that the accomplishment sometimes can be daunting. Like you see USSR, nobody would have believed that one day would end. It ended. So God is the one who's going to accomplish. We don't have to look to accomplish with our work. We have to do, even though it looks like it's impossible. We have to stand up for the people of Palestine and Gaza, even though it could see that it's just impossible and it's even getting worse, God forbid. That said, first of all, that they didn't swallow up the Jewish people in and of itself is a miracle, but it's a simple fact that we don't have family planning, thank God. After World War II, we were small communities in the United States. I think anybody can go and can see the largest, let's just here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right across from Manhattan, the largest concentration of religious Jews. There's not one single Israeli flag. Around the world, the Zionists are afraid of two things, which is a basic logical issue, that statistically there'll be more Arabs and Muslims in the occupied in the Holy Land, then there will be Israeli citizens. That's a fact. How many years is just something you can discuss about, but that's a fact because they're growing in large numbers. And the same thing is with the religious Jews, the anti-Zionists, because we don't have family planning. We have average of very large. We are growing in tremendously large numbers. Thanks to the fact that we don't have to count on the major media outlets that are under the pressure of Zionists. You have the other media outlets that, thank God, are showing the facts that we have these tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating here in the U.S., which was never shown, although we've been doing this for so many years, and in Palestine, in the streets of Jerusalem, how the Jewish, religious Jews in tens of thousands demonstrate and are being brutally beaten. So it's opening the eyes of Jews around the world and of the non-Jews, and they're really beginning to realize that the Palestinian people are not the villains and the victims of Zionism and it's the villains. The victims are the Palestinian people and the Jewish people under the control of the Zionists. So there is definitely a sea change.
Maybe we'll take a couple of questions together so that we can facilitate this a little bit more speedily.
Thank you. I have two short questions. One is, I'm interested to know what is your individual connection and the community's connection to the Holy Land. How would you articulate it?
Yeah.
Why are some of you there? What is that connection? The second, in the trailer, there was a short second where in the bus, there were the rabbis, and there was also a woman from the community, I noticed in the trailer. Also going to Gaza with some of the men. I wanted to ask, are women participating in these visits? What's their
Yeah.
role? Thank you.
We're just going to take a few questions, Rabbi, and then we'll get them answered. So, is there anyone else who has a question? Yes.
I was hoping for some clarification. You mentioned that the Torah forbids 3 things which you point out, and one of them was rebelling against your country, I guess. But how do you see that fitting in with the fact that the countries of the United States and Israel are in support of the Zionist project? So is not rebelling against the actions of those countries a little bit of a contradiction there?
Hi, I'm a Turkish American, and just a quick question on whether or not you're planning to distribute or disseminate your message through this social media for the countries where English is not the main language. For example, in Turkey, there's a big debate going on around the influence of Israel and Zionism, and obviously the majority of the population is under the toxic influence of the Zionist propaganda. And to that end, your views would be very helpful. But I don't think that you can expect people to have them translated into Turkish because they will be blocked and they will be in resistance. Would you consider distributing your message just by way of adding subtitles to your videos? Because that would be immensely helpful.
Thank you. I think that's all the time that we have for that. So we have about 3 minutes to answer all Jewish questions. Yes, thank you.
With God's help, again, it's impossible, but with God's help, we'll try. Whatever God gives me to answer. Our connection to the Holy Land, our acceptance of the Torah, God was to be subservient to God, and God required of us to go. He called the whole world is His, the universe, but He required of us to go to the Holy Land, and at that time, 3,000 years ago, and but at that. It said that anybody who would stop serving, would not worship idols, were allowed to remain there. And we went in with miraculous happenings. The Jews who did not want to go, who were reluctant to go in, we were punished 40 years to be in the wilderness, if anybody knows. Then afterwards we are forbidden, since the destruction of the temple, to go in mass as a whole, as a nation. But we yearn. What do we yearn? Not for a piece of land, that our connection to be close to God, because God called the Holy Land His holy land, like His garden, where God will eventually, we believe as a Jewish belief, that God will rebuild the temple without any human intervention. So it's a spiritual concept, a metaphysical change, and that's why we were never considered a threat to Muslims throughout our history, because they knew we're not going to take over the land. We believe that God one day will make a miracle where all humanity will stop being atheists, He will build a temple, and not everybody will become Jews. When we return, we yearn, we pray for that constantly. Can anybody read our prayers in English or whatever language, in Turkish or whatever it may be, that you will see that our prayers are for the revelation of God, where all humanity will serve Him. And that's the purpose of our lives, to bring glory to God. But the ultimate, the pinnacle, is when God will reveal His glory and all humanity will come up and serve God in the temple that God will build in Jerusalem. That's never a threat to Muslims, to anybody, because that will be when God will do something, a metaphysical change. So that was our connection is deeply with the Holy Land, but not to take over the land from another people. The second question about women, I'm going to go very fast. About women is it's a very deep issue by us. Our women and men are considered one integral body. And the women have their command to say, we have the issue of modesty that the women do not usually go out to demonstrate. We have a whole concept, but they are our backbone, our support. We work together as one entity in our demonstrations, and our whole lives works together as an entity. But it's a more thing that we have to discuss more. And the third thing is, they asked me about a rebellion. It was a very astute question about a rebellion to the United States or whatever it may be, sort of like rebellion. Our approach is constantly, we stand in front of the White House hundreds and hundreds of times, and we plead with them with respect. We say that they should understand that they're being duped by that, but we don't rebel against the United States. So we stand up and we speak with respect to the United States, and we do not rebel against the United States, and we pray for its well-being, but we plead with them not to support the state of Israel and to understand that supporting something that's unacceptable, evil, and it has to end. The issue of going to Turkey, yes, it's a tremendous idea. There should be subtitles. We have in Turkish, we have in Russian, we have in many things, but not enough, very far from enough, and subtitles would be a great idea. God help, like I say, this is the beginning of, with God's help, of a successful, we hope, of a free Palestine.
So, just to wrap up, I'd like to say that if folks would like to learn more about the film, you can check us out at our website. The name of the film is The Rabbis Intifada, and the website is www.therabbisintifada.com. We're currently raising funds to finish the film, so if anyone would like to generously donate to the project, we would be more than welcome. And finally, if you'd like to contact me with any further questions, I'm here. I can give you my email, or you can contact me through the website. Thank you so much.
I'm sure we'll probably have a stick around if anybody wants to ask you questions directly afterwards, but we've got to clear the room for the next group of people. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.